How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be going over how to get the meth recipe and how to actually make meth. Now right off the bat, don't freak out, you don't need all the lab equipment that I have in front of you. This is just one of my bases in the jungle, and I have upgraded it with some of the higher tier production equipment. But really, if you want to go bare bones, as long as you already have a chemistry table, the pressure cooker or oven, and a drying rack, then the only new thing that you'll have to buy is the water bath. And if you're not sure, the water bath is this big box right here. And so for most of the examples that I'll show you today, I'll show you exactly what you would do with each piece of equipment, but ultimately I will be using the highest tier equipment that I have just because it is the most efficient and I'll be making the most. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So before we dive in and actually talk about how to make the methamphetamine, first we have to talk about how to actually get the recipe. And I won't lie, it's a bit of a back and forth, and you do have to do a little bit of grinding in Calion, but that's where we're going to start. So once you grind up a little bit in Calion, you should reach Reputation 1, and that's when you'll get a voicemail from Marcus. So as you go through, he'll tell you that he heard news of some moonshiner that's operating in the jungle west of Calion. He says that it's a good source for ethanol, which is a little odd because as you'll see, we don't actually need ethanol. But nonetheless, if you haven't already explored, it will start heading you in the right direction towards the jungle. And additionally, you'll see that a new dialogue tag opens up for ethanol, so you can start asking about that. So right after you cross the bridge from Calion, you'll notice the bus stop there on your left, and then one of the first buildings that you'll get to is this hardware store. This guy sells all sorts of great things, so keep this in mind, and you can always come back here for a few other materials that we may need. And if you head up the hill to the right of the hardware store, around this corner you'll find this guy Diego. So you can go ahead and talk to him, and he's actually going to be your influencer for the jungle. And additionally, he'll tell you to go and visit his friend next door, and that maybe you'd like his stuff. So if you go to the building behind you, you'll meet this guy Miguel, who says that he has some drug-related goodies. You can go ahead and talk to him, and you'll see that you get a voicemail from Gabriel Moonshiner Martinez. Here it's important that you make sure that you go to a phone and listen to that voicemail, as Gabriel will tell you that he has something crystal-related at his place. You should see the tech and knowledge pop up indicating that you're ready for that step. So you'll see that he sells methamphetamine as well as ephedrine, some iodoric acid, some ethanol vials, some pouches, whatever. You may also have a quest just to go back to the hardware store, so you can go ahead and just talk to that guy again if you haven't done so already. But here in this back room, you'll notice that there's another office desk, and it's important here that you search it as you'll get new recipes acquired, and we'll come back to that later as well. But if we come back down the hill and we head back towards the bus stop, a little secret path that I've been doing is going right through these bushes. If you go right through there, it will bring you over to this hill. This is actually the apartment where I have my lab right now. And over here, you'll find a notice board, a pawn shop, and a bar. And the next thing you want to do is head inside the bar. And we'll just talk to the bartender, and you'll see the ethanol tag is there. And asking that will then progress it further, and it will say that we have to talk to the moonshiner. And you'll also see there that we got a tag about a bridge. But this guy tells us to go find Gabriel by the river. And if we do that, we'll be directed in this direction. Just to the right of the apartment that I showed you, you're going to pass this warehouse. And it's actually going to be this shack right here. So make your way down by whatever means you find necessary. And we'll go inside and talk to him. So we go ahead, we talk to him. And we'll say, are you the one with ethanol? He'll say, yeah, check my offer out. And there you go, you have found the moonshiner. You'll see he has some ethanol, acetic acid, some acetone. And one thing to note is just how much ethanol he has. But if you back out of the shop there and you go to talk to him again, you can ask him to tell you more about the meth recipe. He'll tell you that there's a warehouse somewhere in the jungle where he can dig up the recipe and some ingredients, but he tells you that unfortunately you have to pay him some money. And he'll tell you that $69,000 is his price. So if you go ahead and pay him, he'll tell you he actually doesn't know where the warehouse is, but his nephew does, and that he's a guard that works there. So at this point, I would probably go to another bar that sells more beer, because unfortunately the bar only sells 5 bottles of beer when you're level 0 with them. You could probably check out the general store in the jungle itself, but in my case, I went to the general store here in Calion, and you can see here that they sell 6 bottles of beer. And the reason we're doing this is because the alcoholic nephew wants to drink on the job, so you bring him the 6 bottles of beer, you ask him, are you thirsty? And he'll say, oh yeah, thanks, and he'll let you in, promising that you'll probably find some ingredients and maybe even a recipe. So you'll be let in no problem, but do make sure that you bring some lockpicks with you. Opening this first chest, you can see just how much stuff is in this warehouse. You can see a ton of acetone, a ton of iodoric acid, some ephedrine. All of this is very, very useful. We'll open up the second crate, and again you can see just how much material is in here. And then turn your attention to this bookshelf over here, the stack of books. You can go ahead and collect that, and you'll get the meth recipe from the warehouse. To confirm this, you can open up the journal, and you can go down and see the meth recipe is right there. And while you're here, the fun part can begin. Just go ahead and start stealing some stuff. Note that you will take some pretty big reputation hits for all the theft, and do make sure that you have enough open slots to take as much as you possibly can. And if you want some hints, the best things that you can take are going to be the ephedrine, the ammonia, and the iodoric acid. And you can see here that after taking a substantial amount, I did get the suspect status, so you do have to be a little mindful of how much you're actually taking from the warehouse. Just do be careful with how much you take, because the last thing you want is to get the wanted status. But with that being said, we can start to leave the warehouse, be careful of any bandits on the way, and go ahead and make your way back to your base. And it's a new day. Welcome back. This is my morning voice. Now you notice that I blocked my guy in. That's alright, he never stands up to stretch anyway. But we have our drying rack right here. Now assuming that you got enough raw materials out of the warehouse, we're actually ready to begin. But there still remains the question of what about the recipe that we unlocked at the meth store. And so again, if you have a chemistry table, you can come over to that and you'll see that we actually have two new recipes here. The extraction of ephedrine from cough medicine and from yew branches. And now you'll see here that the extraction from the cough medicine gives a yield of some ephedrine, some acetic acid, some baking soda, and some sugar, where the extraction from the yew branch only gives a yield of some ephedrine. It is worth noting that it gives you 1 gram more, but you do lose out on some of the other key components. Aside from the sugar, we don't need that. And here I'd like to also point out that the chemistry table is pretty overpowered. If we look here, you'll see that it has a cost of 5 watts, it will take 10 seconds and produces 4 grams of waste, and that's for 1 yew branch to make 5 grams of the ephedrine. And then similarly for the cough medicine, it's 5 watts, 8 seconds, and 1 gram of waste. And take note of the amount of grams. We need 10 grams of the cough syrup, and then it gets you 4, 3, 6, and 2. And lastly, you have a crafting query of 90. And now when you compare that to the tier 4 orbital shaker, you'll see here that it costs 300 watts, it takes 9 seconds, also still produces 4 grams of waste. It's taking 1 yew branch, 5 grams, and again, this is also 300 watts, 7 seconds, 1 gram of waste. Remember, we get 4, 3, 6, 2, and it takes 10 grams, but you'll notice that we only have a crafting query of 50. And so if you do decide to do the extraction of ephedrine, the only difference between the orbital shaker and the chemistry table is 1 second. Apart from that, the orbital shaker is worse in almost every regard because it takes way more power and it has a smaller query. And so with all that being said, the last thing I'll show you before we get crafting is where to get the yew branches and the cough medicine. Now as far as getting cough syrup goes, you can really find it in any of the pharmacies. So for example, I'm down here in the peninsula, there's a pharmacy right here. Over in Dueno del Mar, there's another pharmacy right here. And then of course you have a chance of finding them in the chest in any of the medical tents. And you'll see here that she sells it in a moderate quantity of about 10. In addition, she also sells ephedrine. But as far as we're concerned, we only want the cough syrup right now. The next is yew branches. Now I could be wrong, but I could have sworn that I found some yew branches out in the wild, but upon searching a little bit further, I didn't find any. So the only other place that I know about so far where you can buy the yew branches is this lady right here. So on the map, she's listed as the old lady, and she's just east of Slavs Bay and right next to this Mainland Swamps bus stop. Her name is Wispess. You can go ahead and you can talk to her, and you'll see she sells a variety of different things. There's these poppy heads, morning glory, ergo rye, and the yew tree branches. And maybe I came across her another time and just never picked them up, and that's why I was remembering that they were here, but I never actually bought from her. Gonna go ahead and do that now though, so we'll buy 5. And another place that you can come to is actually the Peller. His shop is just located northwest of the Hill Tunnel bus connection. And if we go up to him, you can again see that he has a bunch of different herbs and flowers. In fact, he sells more yew tree branches and a little cheaper than the old lady, so you can go ahead and max that out too. And by all means, you can go and explore around a little bit, but these are the 2 places I know of that you can get the branches. And while I'm here, I can go ahead and get some more baking soda. You can really find them at any general store, and since I'm closest to this, I'll just pick some up here. You should be able to find it as early as Caleon over here at that general store. In fact, I even picked some up at the hardware store right outside of Diego. And welcome back, the part that you have all been waiting for. We're going to get to the crafting finally. So to start, let's go ahead and cover the extraction first. Your yew tree branches you can either have in your hideout stash, or you can just have them in your inventory. If you're using the cough syrup though, you are going to want to drag that into your substance storage. So go ahead and unpack that. Coming over to the chemistry table, we'll open this up, and we'll start with the extraction of ephedrine from the cough medicine. So I'll just go ahead and I'll queue one up. And with that now being finished, we'll see that we have all of our output added to the substance storage. And we can do the same with the yew branches. And there we go, we got our 5 grams of ephedrine. And just to showcase some of the higher tier production equipment, you'll see in the centrifuge we have the same 2 recipes. And again, we have those recipes available to us at the orbital shaker. And before I forget, also make sure that you unpack your baking soda. But now we'll come over to the water bath, and the next thing we'll look at is the ephedrine compound. And you'll see that we have 2 recipes, one using the baking soda and one using ammonia. So we'll start with the lower tier one, the baking soda. You'll see that it only gives a yield of 5 grams of the ephedrine compound. It will still take 10 grams of ephedrine and 18 grams of baking soda. You can note the power cost, time, and waste up here as well. But if you followed along at the warehouse and you got some of that ammonia, it will pretty much always be in your better interest to go ahead and craft with this. It's way more efficient, and it yields double the amount of ephedrine compound. So we'll go ahead and we'll queue up the higher tier craft. While that's crafting away, you can keep note that you'll only need 5 grams of the compound. So now that we have the ephedrine compound, I just want to point out some of the weird nature of some of the crafting equipment that we have. So if you look at the autoclave, for example, you'll see that we can make the methamphetamine compound, but we actually can't make any ephedrine compound here. And same with the pressure cooker, you can make the methamphetamine, but not the ephedrine. And again, same with the kitchen stove. The only other place that you can make this ephedrine compound is actually at the ice bath, which is the tier 4 equipment and is a little more efficient. But if we go back and we look at the autoclave, for example, which is supposed to be a higher tier than the pressure cooker or the stove, you'll see that we actually have low quality equipment and will take a 10% production loss. So it's really weird that you need the water bath regardless at this stage in the game to make the ephedrine compound, and you take no production loss from making the methamphetamine compound here. Anyway, small tangent, but I wanted to point that out. So the water bath is really going to be a staple for you regardless, and it's going to be the ideal crafting equipment that you use to make this methamphetamine compound. So we're going to go and look at those recipes now. Again, you'll see that we have 2 tiers. The first one takes 5 grams of the ephedrine compound we just made and 25 grams of acetone, resulting in 5 grams of the methamphetamine compound. And then the higher tier one will actually take 5 grams of ephedrine, 7 grams of the iodoric acid, which you also should have got from the warehouse, and it will make 10 grams of the methamphetamine compound. So we'll go ahead and we'll queue this one up. And so with that one being done, we can go ahead and continue to our last step. Like I said before, you can go ahead and you can use the drying rack if that's all you have. Regardless of which equipment you use, it's still going to take 10 grams. And just to show you the difference between the lowest tier and the highest tier method of drying, the drying rack will give you 1.6 grams with 8.5 grams of waste, and it doesn't take any power. But if we look at the tray dryer over here, you'll see that we get the full 2 grams when we dry it. It will make 8 grams of waste, but it also costs 1200 watts of power. So again, do whatever is within your means, but I'm going to go ahead and use the tray dryer. While that's crafting, I'll also point out that this is only 20 seconds, whereas the drying rack takes 50. But there we go, we're all done. 2 grams of the methamphetamine was added to the substance storage. And that's about it. Stay tuned for future guides. I'll be covering all the other drugs and recipes as quick as I can. These videos do take a fair bit of time just to make sure I'm being thorough, but I do hope I clarified some things. And by all means, if I missed anything or you have additional questions, let me know. And that's about it. If you're in the States, happy 4th of July, and thank you all for watching.